Welcome to the Mindful Movement Show. We're your hosts, Tony and Amanda Johnson.
This is a podcast dedicated to helping moms and dads heal their hurts, transform their health from the inside out, and become the best people, partners, and parents they can possibly be.
Our mission is to normalize struggle and profile stories of resilience, character building, and the process of healing and becoming.
In Season 1, we spotlight healers from a variety of modalities who are also parents. We hope you enjoy the show. Morning, Mindful and Fit fam. This is Tony Johnson.
And Amanda Johnson.
Tuning in for the Mindful and Movement Show. We are so blessed and honored to have Larry Hagner. He is a husband, father of 4 boys, and the founder of the Dad Edge podcast and movement. His mission is to empower men to live and lead legendary lives by offering them skills, tools, and community to create legendary marriages, epic connections with their kids, master their personal finance, and optimize their physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health as they lead their families with confidence, grace, and patience. Larry is a best-selling author, speaker, and an amazing mentor to Amanda and myself. We're grateful to have him on the show today to discuss his background and upbringing, some of the struggles and challenges he's faced as an entrepreneur, a husband, and a father, and his process of becoming the transformative leader he is. Larry, welcome to the Mindful and Movement Show. It is an absolute pleasure to have you.
Welcome.
Oh, it's great to yeah, thank you so much for having me, you guys. This is super cool. I'm glad to get in on the early stages of your show.
Well, thank you so much for sparing some time to talk with us, and maybe just tell us a little bit about where you're calling in from this morning, how you're doing.
I'm doing great. So, by the way, if you hear a massive dog bark, that's my dog over there on the couch back there. He's 160 pounds, so he doesn't have a bark. He has more of like a roar. So I walked him early this morning, so he's passed out. But if you hear him bark, if somebody comes to the door, that's what that is. But I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. And like you guys said, I have 4 boys, 16, 14, one that's about to be 9 here in 2 weeks, and 6. Been married for 19 years, known my wife though for 26 years. And, the journey of fatherhood, man, it's been a journey, and it's been an educational one at that. And, I host Dad Edge and facilitate Dad Edge, and, still an idiot to a lot of degrees, and still an imperfect father and a moron. And I make a gazillion mistakes every day, but I enjoy the heck out of it. And it's so much fun.
Yes, sir. And one of the things I like most about you and your presence and your character is that sense of humility, that sense that you can always be building, growing, learning, and developing as a person, a partner, and a parent. One of the primary goals of our show is to normalize struggle and to have vulnerable conversations that promote tools and skills for first-time parents, specifically those who have survived adverse childhood experiences. And so I know a lot about your story and your upbringing and your background and experiences, but I'd like you to share some of those starting at an early age, because we fundamentally believe that those shape how we show up in the world as people, parents, partners, and in your case, a coach. So would you care to share kind of a big picture understanding of your upbringing and experiences and how they shape how you show up in the world?
Yeah. So I would say, looking back, 30,000 foot view, and I'll kind of go through some step-by-step milestone ages for you guys, just so you get some context. But half my childhood was spent without a father figure. And then the other half was spent with this more of like a revolving door of different men that my mom was either married to or dating, who were, could be father figures. But there was always an element of toxicity, substance abuse, that kind of thing. It was always like, it was the same guy see, there you go. Told you.
There's the line.
It was always the same guy. Right. Yeah. It's always the same. It was always like the same guy, just different face, different name. And so I was born in 1975, but my parents were married in 71, and they were married for 4 years before they had me. And then after I was born, they just got divorced. It was really, they were kids. They were 21 when they got married. And so they were really young when they got married, and then they got divorced right after I was born. I never knew my dad. My relationship with him and my mom, it just dissolved, like pretty much. I don't know how long it took. I don't know the details, but to me it was overnight, but I'm sure it was longer than that. But I never knew him. Bottom line, I never knew him. It was just me and my mom until I was 4. I still remember men coming to pick up. I am 47. I still remember men coming to pick up their kids from school, from preschool. So I knew what a dad was growing up, but I knew I didn't have one. But I didn't really feel that I was missing out on anything because in my 4-year-old brain, like I came to my own conclusion that moms just find dads eventually. And my mom just hadn't found her dad yet. So I was like, oh, no big deal. She'll find him eventually. And then first time she ever brought a man home, I'll never forget it. She told me that day, she's like, hey, I'm going to have a friend over for dinner tonight. I'd really like for you to meet him. He's a really special friend. And I heard the word he, and I was like, huh. I was like, that's kind of interesting. I was like, I wonder if she found my dad, right? So this guy comes walking in. It's 1979. He's wearing a 3-piece suit. He was a white collar data software engineer for a computer company. And he comes walking in, trench coat, mustache, briefcase, the whole 9 yards, double Windsor knot tie, and comes walking in. And I'll never forget like seeing a man walk through my front door for the first time. And I shook this guy's hand, and literally the very first thing that rattled off my mouth was, are you going to be my dad? And I just was like glowing, curiosity. And this guy, I just remember it being very awkward in the room after I dropped the bomb of that question. But my mom, I think, kind of took that as a sign. It was almost like maybe a Jerry Maguire moment for her, where she sees her little kid, hug, Tom Cruise. And she's like, oh my God, like this is fate or destiny. I think my mom kind of felt that way. And she ended up marrying him 6 months later, and they were married for 6 years. And what I can tell you is that 6 years was pretty darn rough. Started out really good, but ended really bad. Just every year they were together, their relationship just dismantled even more. Like there was so much fighting and abuse and drinking, and my dad had a very heavy hand and didn't hesitate to hit me, didn't hesitate to push me down or throw me around, that kind of thing when he was mad or drinking. They got divorced when I was 10, and he left. Never seen him since. And I started asking questions at that point in time because I was like, well, I know I didn't come from this guy, and I know about the birds and the bees. So where did I come from? And I had no clue. I remember asking my mom, like, hey, where did I come from? Who's my real dad? And she's like, well, I was actually married before, and I had no idea. So a couple of years passed by, and I won't go into the details just for sake of time, but I ended up meeting my dad at 12, and it was not on purpose. It was a total accident. And I will never forget being 12, and my mom was dating a few guys here and there, and all of them were just like disaster. And I remember like my dad meeting him and seeing him, and I was like, oh my gosh, I kind of look like this guy a little bit. And like, this is my real dad. Right. And I was so excited. He was remarried, had a 2-year-old son, another one on the way. And we hung out for like 5 months. And he only lived 3 miles from us, which was crazy to me. I never met him, but that's how close he lived. Wow. And he came to all my Little League games, and we hung out every week. And then right around 5 months or so, he started to kind of drift. I felt like there was this stress that was on him, and there was just something not right. The best way I can describe it was, imagine that you're dating somebody, right? So Amanda, for you, it's a guy, for me and Tony, it's a woman, but imagine you're dating somebody and they're just not into you anymore, but they haven't told you yet, but it's coming. Yeah. That's what it felt like. And I'll never forget picking up the phone after like about a month of feeling that. And I was like, hey man, like what's going on? I'm 12 and talking to like a mid-30s guy. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? Like, I just feel like something's wrong. And that's when he told me, he's like, hey, it's me, it's not you. I can't really do this right now. It's too complicated, and he just wanted to start over, and that was it. And he left. And I remember that really kind of spiraled me pretty bad, like losing my dad, my real dad, for the second time. At this point, there were 3 big abandonments, in my life at 12. And I just kind of gave up. I failed 8th grade. I actually failed the 8th grade. Had to do 8th grade twice. Got really heavy, really fat, ate my feelings away. And then I did 8th grade again and got into a decent high school, actually an all boys college prep high school. Doing 8th grade again was like the best thing that ever happened to me. Lost a bunch of weight, turned my life around. My mom continued to date and marry just these losers constantly. Went away to college, never went back home after that. Graduated college, married my college sweetheart. I'm in medical device sales, successful, lucrative career. I'm 30 years old, been married for a couple of years, first son on the way. I'm in a Starbucks here in St. Louis. Hadn't seen my dad in 18 years. My dad came into that Starbucks getting his morning coffee. It's a total fluke. Had no idea, right?
Wow.
He and I ended up connecting. Here we are 17 years later. We have a relationship. And me starting Dad Edge really started with a very dark moment. I'm happy to share that with you. But that was my journey as a kid and into adulthood.
Yeah. And you and I share so much about our upbringing, in the sense that we both faced father wounds and had to confront abandonment. and kind of use these experiences as a catalyst to promote growth, connection, and development for others. Can you talk about how, like, the series of events or the journey that led you to turn these painful moments into your purpose as a person and a coach?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for the first 6 years I was a dad, I had my two oldest boys. They were 6 and 4. I was like, it was really, really important to me to be a good dad and to be a good husband. Like, for me, I did not want to, I'd seen 3 divorces that my mom went through and a revolving door of just other disaster relationships in between. So it was really important to me to have a good, successful marriage and to be a good dad. And I made a lot of promises to myself that I didn't keep, meaning that I was going to be a good husband no matter what. So I had the intent and the desire, but there was something missing, and I'll get to what that thing was missing. I had the intent and desire. I was like, I will never strike my kids out of anger. I will keep my patience and my calm with my kids. I want to connect with my kids on a high level. Like, I had this desire. So the two desires to have this great, fulfilling marriage and this great, connection with my kids, I was failing at it. And the big missing ingredient for me, and I didn't know it at the time, it wasn't a lack of desire, and it wasn't a lack that I didn't want it. It's just I did not know how to get it. It was basically like trying to drive, from one place to another that's really far away without GPS or a map. Just like, hey, go figure it out. There's highways, there's north, south, east, and west. You'll figure it out. And that's a really poor way to go about it. And unfortunately, that's the way we all go about it. And it led me to a really dark place as a dad. My 4-year-old, he's 14 years old now, but he was 4 at the time. We were getting ready to move. I had a really bad day at work that day. I lost a huge customer, my biggest customer. It's going to impact our income for the next 12 months. And I just remember I was packing up our house, and I was just such in a foul mood. And, I packed up my kids' playroom. It took me like 3.5 hours. I had boxes like from floor to ceiling, like their playroom, and had everything packed up. My 4-year-old comes walking down, and I told him, I was like, hey, he wanted to play in his playroom. I was like, I left some toys out for you here. I was like, all these are packed up. I was like, I'm going to go take a break. I was like, please don't unpack anything. What do you think a 4-year-old's going to do? Right. I don't even know why I expected anything different. I was just dumb. I'm not looking back on it. Right. So I come downstairs, and he had pulled out like half of everything that I had packed up. It took me hours. And I was like, oh my God. I got so angry, and it was a knee-jerk reaction, and I spanked him on his rear end. And I always told myself I'm not going to hit my kids. And I spanked him, and unfortunately I spanked him, and he lost his balance, and he fell. And something really my heart broke in that moment. Like, I was like, seeing my son topple over because I spanked him was something I'll never forget. But the thing that I'll really never forget is realizing what I had just done. And I went to help him up, and he looked at me like he was terrified of me. And that, when I saw that look in his eye, I didn't just see my son who was scared of me. I saw me and how I grew up. And I just went into my office and lost it. I mean, a lot of guys, like, they're like, you spanked your kid. Who cares? Like, kids get spanked. But to me, it was different. I did not want to spank my kids because I knew what it felt like to be hit. And it was in that moment I really started taking a good look at my life. And I was like, what am I good at? Like, what am I good at? And there wasn't many things, but there was a few. I was good at fitness, and I was good at my job, and I was good at martial arts. And I'll tell you why. I was good at fitness because I have a 4-year degree in exercise science. So I was educated. I was trained. I was good at my job because I went through 90 days of die-hard training in order to be able to sell those surgical devices. And I had to get certified in several different things, continue education for, to even keep my job, every year. And then I looked at something like martial arts, which I loved. It was a huge part of my life. I was like, why am I decent at martial arts? Well, I go to class 3 times a week, and I have an instructor. I have a mentor. I have someone who polishes up the things that I'm doing, and I practice. What have I done with marriage and fatherhood? That's a big fat nothing. Like, I'm winging it. And here's the crazy thing that I think, and whenever I share this on other podcasts, like, I don't know, it's just such a strong reminder for me when I say it. But when I say it to the host, it's like, if you really look at marriage, right? And if you look at parenting, our society and the way, and we even expect this of ourselves, we just expect that we're going to wing it and figure it out, and it's going to be glorious and it's going to be great. And if it's not, we come down on ourselves horribly. There is no other area in our entire existence as a human being that we go about life that way. I don't know about you guys, but the next time I need surgery, I'm not going to go to a guy off the street who says, yeah, I watched a few YouTube videos, but don't worry, I can figure it out.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, or a cop, it takes 990 hours to go from cadet to officer of training. we don't do that in the military. We don't do that in careers. We don't do that in college, but we do that in our two most important relationships. I don't know why that is. So the thing that was lacking there was really the skills and the training.
And that's something that I've taken with great pride and humility as well from the Dad Edge, in terms of having a community of men to do life with and to learn from, and to basically understand that you don't have to be alone in your painful moments. So I'd actually like you to zoom in on that moment where you ended up spanking your son and he fell over. What were the series of steps that led you to zoom out and consider what you're good at and move toward the Dad Edge? Like, go back to that moment and tell me how you went from the reaction of seeing yourself and the pain and hurt that you've lived through to creating the Dad Edge.
I honestly think a lot of it, I'm a faith-based person. I think a lot of it was just divine intervention. I remember going into my office and I remember sitting there, and what do you do when you have a bad moment as an adult? You distract yourself with some sort of technology. And at the time, it was 2012, I mean, Facebook was kind of big at the time and it was kind of getting bigger. And so I went into my office and I got on Facebook. Like, I was just like, I'll scroll through everybody else's life so I don't just think about how crappy my own is and what I just did, right? And the catalyst to this whole thing was when I saw this button in the left-hand corner that said create a page. And I had never created a page, never had followers or whatever. Like, I was just a normal dude. And I remember I just clicked that button and I did not know what I was really doing. And I just remember this thing popped up and said, what do you want to name your page? And the words, The Good Dad Project, I just typed it. And that was like when I started thinking about, like, what do I need to do to figure this out? Because I'm obviously not doing it well. What do I need to do? And that's when I started thinking about those areas in my life. Like, what am I good at? Well, I'm good at these things for one common denominator. It's because I've learned how, and I'm in a constant practice, constantly learning. It never ends. Constantly learning how to hone those skills. Well, why does marriage and fatherhood have to be any different than that? Why can't I learn those skills? So I created that page, and for literally just myself, like, I was the Good Dad Project. That was me. I was like, I'm going to be this project. And I created that page because I made a commitment. I was like, I'm going to learn one thing new every day as it relates to connecting with my wife or connecting with my kids, being a more patient father, to have better conversations, like to just be more resilient, whatever, a better human being. And I'm just going to put it right here. And I never did it for a following, never did it for any of that stuff. It was my own personal, like, online kind of like diary, right? I didn't even know what a page was. So I started doing that. And I started getting like this following. And then I'll never forget the very first time, and the following got kind of big and the engagement sort of got big. And this before I started even blogging or had a website. And I'll never forget, I got a DM from a woman, right? And I'll never forget her name. Her name was Brandy Lockstamper. And she contacted me and she said, hey, we want you to come speak at our mom's group at this church. And I was like, speak on what? Like, right? And she's like, here's my number, call me. So I called her and I was like, hey, I got your message. She goes, yeah. She goes, we want you to come out and speak on what the Good Dad Project is. And I was like, it's just a page that I have. And she's like, yeah, we really like it though. A lot of us follow it. And we really like the voice that you have for men. And you're very authentic and very imperfect. And you just sort of like air out all your dirty laundry all the time. I'm like, yeah. She goes, well, we want you to come and speak. And I was like, well, how many people would I be speaking to? She's like, oh, we have the biggest group of women in the area. There's like 300 of us. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, what do you want me to, right? I was like, what do you want me to speak on? Right. She goes, we want you to speak on being a better father. I was like, you got the wrong guy. I was like, that's not me. I was like, I'm trying to figure this out. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. She's like, no, that's what we really like about it, that you don't know what you're doing, but you've learned a few things, but you're just so authentic about it. So I did it, and I had no clue what I was going to do. And I just spoke from my heart, and they really liked it. But that was like the first, I guess, engagement that I had with this whole thing. And then I started to kind of wonder, I was like, maybe there's something here. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So from what you're sharing, it sounds like you're very like introspective. And I know we're talking about leadership a little bit before we started the call. And in leadership studies, they have this idea of the balcony view, being able to get up high and to be able to look down on a situation and critically think about what's going on. And you seem to be really good at engaging that view in different aspects of your life. You shared a little bit about the moment that you took a step back and questioned or wanted to continue to develop as a father. I'm curious if you can kind of speak to what that balcony view looked like in your relationship with your partner. You mentioned that you felt like you had to grow, or there were challenges as a husband as well. What did that journey look like? And kind of what was that moment where you were able to take that balcony view and say, something might be able to change here, or I could be doing something better? Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a laundry list of things I could have been doing better. And one of them, luckily I'm married to a very patient woman. And what I mean by that is, like, I just had no relationship skills whatsoever. My wife kind of came from the opposite of what I came from. In other words, like, she came from this great family. There's been not one, her mom is one of 6 kids, and her family's huge. Like, she has like 30 first cousins, but like generationally, like, her family's
Wow.
really, really big. If you go back 4 and 5 generations, not one person in her family has ever been divorced. Not one, ever.
Wow.
I've never even heard of anything like that. So in her family, you're married for life. It's kind of like you're my lobster, right, from Friends, but like, you're married for life. And that was kind of like, that was the way my wife was brought up, is that you get married and you stick it out, and you don't want to be in an abusive situation, but you stick it out. So I just didn't really have any skills. Like, I didn't have communication skills. Like, if we had an argument, I would shut down, or she'd come to me to talk, and I would give her advice. Right. And then I'd get upset if she didn't take my advice. Right. Cause like, I had no clue that women talk, not because they want advice, but because they want to connect. So I didn't know that back then. And plus, like, I didn't do anything horrible. Right. I mean, I never hit her. I've never called my wife a name ever, but I wasn't showing up. I was probably showing up maybe a quarter of how I do now, because I just didn't know how. Here's the other crazy thing. I look at this now. I didn't know it then, but I'm looking back on it. I remember it now. I remember having this perception, and it made sense to me at the time, that if I don't get too close to my marriage, and if I don't get too close to my kids, but I just sort of kind of have like this arm's length approach to those 2 relationships, I won't lose them, and I won't screw them up too bad. Like, that's how screwed up that perspective was, because like, I kind of just saw myself as like, I'm not really maybe even worthy of this, right, in a way. But I would say over time, the thing that has really honed Jessica and I's marriage, because we've been married for 19 years, and I will tell you, the past 10 years, and especially the last 5 years, have never been better in our relationship.
That's awesome.
But it's because we both work at it, and we both come to the table with curiosity and conversations, and we're constantly pursuing each other. We're constantly dating each other. We're very respectful of each other. We publicly show the kids, in front of them, how much we love each other. I'm very complimentary of my wife. She's complimentary. We're respectful to each other in front of the kids. We're affectionate in front of the kids. So, our kids get grossed out by us, which is our goal. So.
And in public on your show, you've talked about the code of conduct you and Jessica share. I'd like you to share that with our listeners and how that came to be. Was it organic? Was it something that you sat down and you wrote down? Kind of discuss your code of conduct and how it came to be.
It's been very organic, actually. I mean, we've whittled it down to the top things that we don't do, right? But it's always been pretty darn organic in our relationship. And I would also say this too, that I think a lot of it had to do with her, because she came from a family that didn't really fight. Like, they didn't really argue. She didn't really see her parents like battle. She always saw her parents be respectful. I always saw the opposite. So women that I had dated before her, they were like your typical kind of toxic relationships at time to time, right? Where like you'd fight and there would be like name calling and like toxic things that were said and old wounds that we brought up and things slapped in your face and that kind of thing. And I mean, I'll never forget, I was even in a long-term relationship where this chick like would slap me and I would just like let it happen. Like, that just blows my mind. That was back in high school and college, but I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, tolerating that. But anyway, with my wife and I, one of the things that we do is we never call each other a name, not even joking. So like, I'll never even laugh and be like, you're such a bitch, never, even if it's just in joking, or like, she'll never call me a name. So we never call names. If we have a disagreement, we don't call them a fight because we don't battle. But if we have a disagreement, we speak to each other in no different of a voice tone than what you hear right now. The other thing too, is if our disagreement gets up to the point where we can tell the other person needs a break, and we never get to a heated point. Normally, if we have if a person gets to that point, it's because maybe something horrible happened that day, to the other person. Like we just went through something, I won't go into it, with my 8-year-old went through something at school that was like devastating. And I was so angry about it. I was so pissed about it that we were talking one night, and I was so angry that she came in to give me a hug, and I was like, can you give me like 45 minutes to go just cool down? Like I just need a minute. And she's like, yeah, of course. So like being able to, and I do that for her too, like being able to read each other, right? So it's like you can tell when is the other person like just needs space and you need to pick up the slack with the kids or whatever else. The other thing too is we don't ever use past transgressions as a way to fight in the present time. So like if she did something that really made me upset, years ago, or vice versa, we never bring that stuff up. Like, oh yeah, you remember that time 10 years ago? Well, you did this, this, and this. So, and the other thing too is like our conversations are more solution based than they are problematic complaining.
Yes, sir. And I think that speaks to some of the safeguards that you have in place to prevent toxicity from showing up in your relationship. If we'd like to go to the flip side and speak about, like, for our relationship, we have 5 keys. The 5 keys that we'll always go back to when times are tough to reignite spark or intimacy or connection. We also have done a really in-depth job trying to define what love means to us. We both have been divorced. We've both been in relationships where love burned out and where love became toxic. And so from the very first, series of dates that we went on, when we started to become more in love with each other, we've had very deep discussions of what love meant.
We actually joke on our first date. We talked about all the things you shouldn't talk about: politics, divorce, philosophy,
all of that.
religion.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
You guys broke all the rules.
We just did it all.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious, have you had conversations with your wife about what love means? And whether you have or not, what do you believe to be like a few of the keys for your relationship to remain intimate, close, and connected?
So one of the things that my wife and I do is we come to conversations with each other with curiosity and appreciation. So that's one rule that we follow, meaning most individuals, most human beings, most interactions, you come to a conversation or an interaction with expectation and agenda. Hey, Tony, I'm going to come and talk to you about this because I want this to happen at the end of our conversation, right? We don't ever use conversation as a way to explore or create more depth in our relationship. We use it as a way to be like, I have this agenda that I want to cover with you in this conversation, and this is the way I hope it plays out at the end, right? We do this in marriage. We do this with our kids, all the time. So that's one thing that we do. We also, we are big proponents of date nights. My wife and I have to have a date night at least every other week, at least, where we're not dad and we're not mom. We're husband and wife. We're a couple. And we use those date nights to not just go out and have a meal and, stare at each other. We use those date nights to really get to know each other over and over and over again, to fall in love over and over and over again. And we can always tell when we're not keeping that cadence with our date nights because we can feel some distance between us. Not negative, but it's just sort of like, I don't feel as close to you as I normally do. Right. And the other thing too that we do is we want to teach our kids how to have a functional relationship. So I'm going to go on a bit of a rant here, and it's done out of love, but I'll tell you that I think most marriages, and studies have shown this, right? So everyone knows that the divorce rate's 50%. The things that people don't know is that the 50% that stay together, studies and polls and surveys have shown that people are divided up into 3 different camps, and they're divided up actually equally, which is kind of crazy. So 33%, 33%, 33%. 33% of marriages that stay together can actually say that they're probably like you guys and they're like me and Jessica. They're like, man, this is great. Like, I love it. Like, I don't know if I'd really change anything. This is awesome, right? It's everything I ever wanted. That's the first 1/3. And there's a common denominator within those couples. Then there's the second camp. And the second camp is kind of like, they're on the fence. They're like, it's okay. It's not the best. I don't really think I want to get divorced, but it's not necessarily what I signed up for, but I guess it's tolerable. We'll just kind of coexist and be intimate every now and again, raise these kids and whatever. We're friends, I guess. And then that's camp number 2. Camp number 3 is these couples have completely and totally individual lives. They have no connection to each other whatsoever. They're strangers living underneath the same roof. Chances are they're probably not sleeping in the same bedroom. They stay together because it's too much of a hassle to get divorced, or they're just waiting for the kids to move out, but they have completely and totally just separate lives. Now, here's what I'll tell you. If you're in camp 1, that's really 12% of marriages that actually work out. Everybody focuses on 50% divorce rate. What they don't focus on is about 88% of marriages don't really work out the way we think. Yeah. The one common denominator within that first camp is it's what you guys are probably doing. It's what me and Jessica are doing. It's like, hey, there's growth to be had every day. We're 1% better every single day. We know that there's work involved. We know that there's self-work involved. And we know that as a married couple, we need to work together, and it's constantly changing. It's constantly dynamic. And we don't necessarily look in the rear view mirror of our relationship being like, I wish it was like back then what it was. Because a lot of people do that. Well, I wish it was like it was before we had kids. It's not. It's never going to be. But it can be better if you look forward, right? We can go co-create that. But here's where the rant begins. A lot of married couples just go on this total automatic pilot, and this they almost like just numb themselves out. Like, I'm busy with work, or I'm numbed out at home, or I'm smoking weed as a dad or a mom, or I'm drinking a lot of alcohol, and I don't really, they're just sort of there existing. And that drives me almost crazier than not making a decision either way. Because what are you teaching your kids? You're teaching your kids just to numb out, and this is what marriage is, and you just sort of like hang out. And no, your kids have a front row seat to your marriage, and they're looking at us, right, as like, that is the way a relationship should be, right? Whether it's good or bad. If it's a toxic relationship, I'll never forget growing up, like my mom like had all these toxic relationships. And in my mind, I was like, well, I guess that's what relationships are. Sooner or later, they start out really, really great. Then they fight a lot. Then they kind of make up and they're happy. And then they fight a lot. And then they kind of make up and they're happy. And then they come to an end. And that's relationships. That's not the way my wife was raised. So if you think about it, we have this amazing opportunity to show these kids what a functional relationship looks like. And once these kids get to be teens, a lot of moms and dads are like, why can't my son or daughter like find a normal like relationship? It's all these crazy roller coaster rides. Well, look at what have you been showing them, right, over the years? So that's the way we view our relationship. We're like, man, we got to be on point with this. And if we're not, we're doing not only us a disservice, but them too.
I think it's really powerful to understand marriage as something that is a conscious choice to choose your perfectly imperfect partner every single day, and to do the inner work and the collective work to grow into the model of parent and partner that you want to show your kids. And understanding that even the most ideal relationships, or even the most connected relationships, experience moments of struggle. So the follow-up I have for you on that, what I don't believe is a rant, I think it's a very profound statement, is what would you say are the first steps that someone in the latter two camps, either the just hanging out, making it work, not really happy or satisfied, or the strangers living under the same roof, what are two steps that you say that anyone listening who's in those two camps can take today to up-level their performance and to get to the what you're calling the first camp?
That's a great question. So number one, forget the fact that you can do this alone, and forget the fact that you can't do it without learning skills. Like like for instance, we've got great data on men who want to come join us in Dad Age Alliance Mastermind, because we have men apply. Now, here's the funny thing. We put that application process in place for a couple different reasons. Number one, our application is 7 questions. This will blow your mind. The application is 7 questions. And originally we wanted to create this application because we're like, hey, we want to know some information on these men before they get on a live call with us. Like listen, man, like what's on your mind and heart? What has your attention, right? What do you want to do? And, the application process takes maybe 6 minutes. And here's what we have found out. And I'm sharing those things with you, the 6 questions in 6 minutes for good reason. So I put that application in place years and years ago because I just want to get to know the guys. Well, what we've learned now, we've got great data with well over probably 2,000 applications at this point. What is on the mind and heart of men who want to level up, like quote unquote, level up or grow, right? But we have 80% of our applications of men who want to level up their marriage. They want to create an extraordinary marriage. And then if you get that even a bit deeper, a lot of women and a lot of guys, we stereotype ourselves, or we're stereotyped that we just want more sex. That's not what a guy wants. We got the data to prove it. What a guy really wants is better communication with his wife. Not kidding. He wants to have better conversations with his wife. Now, I really want your audience to know that, because again, we're stereotyped into like, we're just like these physical beings, but that's not what guys really want. They want that emotional connection with their wife. So when I ask a guy, hey, tell me what are we celebrating if you have better communication with your wife? And most of the time they cannot articulate it. They're like, well, I want it better than it is today. Well, that's not measurable. Well, I want more communication. Those are the two things we hear. Well, if you had more communication, what would you do with it? And then that's when you're like, you see them like, I'm not sure. Like if I had more time to talk to my wife, I don't know. That's the gap. So for instance, we teach 9 skills within communication alone with a man. So like tactical empathy, right? Being able to emotionally label your wife, ask generative questions, create a vision around your marriage, right? Create core values that is your compass in marriage, right? Create an environment of psychological safety where you as a man can feel safe sharing anything with your wife, free from blame, shame, and pain. And the same goes for her. She can share these things with you, and you can be resilient to take these things on and to create an environment without judgment or shame of whatever is on her mind and heart, right? It's really hard to do. So when you think about, like what's 1, 2, or 3 things, what's 1 or 2 things that married couples can do? Number 1 is don't try to do it by yourself. Get a coach, get a mentor, get a mastermind, get a therapist. Like my wife and I have seen the same marriage therapist for 20 years. And we look at therapy like an oil change. Like you don't drive 30,000 miles in your car without getting the oil change. Your engine's going to blow up, but we'll do that in our relationships, right? But my wife and I will still check in at least 3 times a year with our marriage therapist, just because we'll reach a point in our marriage or raising these kids where we're like, I don't really know what to do. Do you? Nope, I don't either. Okay, let's go ask Tom. He'll know what to do. And we do. And so number 1, don't think you have to do it alone. And number 2, just know at anything else in life, whether it's your job, whether it's fitness, martial arts, whether it's being a better speaker, whether it's, going out and getting your master's degree, you have to learn. You have to take courses. You have to have someone teaching you something. Your marriage is no different. So learn skills. And most importantly, if I could whittle it down to the most focused thing possible, learn skills around communication. That alone, my God, I wish somebody would have knocked me upside the head before I got married and be like, hey man, if you really want your marriage to thrive, just learn these 3 things, just these 3 things alone. And it will make a ton of difference.
And before Amanda follows up with a question, I just got to say that I'm a communication professor, and I still needed focused skill building around my marriage and around being a parent, especially coming from models of toxicity and models of narcissism, empathy in my parents. I needed to know that my pain didn't have to become shame because I viewed it alone. And if I could offer one important and meaningful plug for the Dad Edge Alliance, it saved my life in so many ways. This is not something I've said publicly, but I feel comfortable enough to share it now. On December 25th, 2021, I looked over to Amanda after a particularly volatile day, and in which I became my father in so many ways. I didn't use physical violence, but I yelled at my 1.5-year-old in a way that is not acceptable and created a shame spiral in my own mind that led me to say, maybe your lives would be better if I wasn't in it. And the very next week, I joined the Dad Edge Alliance and have gotten back to my center. So even a communication professor who was literally that semester teaching interpersonal communication, the course in which I offer skills and tools for people to become better communicators in their relationships, I was still struggling and hurting and needed a community of people that I could lean into to know that my pain didn't have to be shameful. And so thank you for, in many ways, giving me tools, skills, and community to save my own life. And I really do think that that's very important for anyone listening to know that if you are struggling, there's always an opportunity to seek community and support, because the world is a better place with you in it.
Man, I didn't know that. And thank you so much for sharing that with me and your audience. Somebody in your audience is going to be blessed from hearing you say that, because they're not going to feel alone. Unfortunately, it was actually back in 2021 in January, we lost a Dad Edge Alliance member. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody. This was a very good man. He was just trying to level up his marriage a little bit, and nothing was on fire. And he has two beautiful kids. Do you mind if I just story tell a little bit,
Please,
on this? Because I think it's being in this space with men for 10 plus years now. I don't know if I've ever met a man that taking his own life had not crossed his mind to some degree. I've seen men in the hospital, where they basically wave the white flag saying like, either I admit myself or I'm going to kill myself. Right. So, and I was there myself back in 2015. And mine was because I hit a horrible snag with my sleep. Unfortunately, I went 33 days with virtually no sleep. I was sleeping about an hour and a half, 2 hours a night. Wow. And I just could not get my sleep in order. It turns out what happened was, I didn't know it at the time, but I was overtraining for an ultra event that I was getting ready for. And I just completely fried out my adrenals. And, I could not settle my mind or my body down. Wow. Lost like 30 pounds, and I don't have 30 pounds to lose. And I was physically, mentally, emotionally just gone. And I was a burden on my wife. I couldn't work. She had to do everything. Like, I was literally just nothing. And I told myself my family would be better off without me, because my doctors even told me, they're like, dude, if you don't get this sleep thing in order, you're going to have a heart attack or a stroke or be a vegetable. Like, you've got to get this figured out. And I was they were trying me on every type of medication possible to get me to sleep, and I couldn't. And I'll never forget, my wife was going to leave to take the boys to Great Wolf Lodge, that we had scheduled a trip, and I couldn't go. I was like, there's no way I can be in a hotel with everybody and try to have a good time at this water park and be 25 plus days without sleep. Like, I just couldn't do it. And I'll never forget looking at my wife, because I kind of had this plan. She's going to leave, and I'm going to go ahead and relieve everybody of the burden that I'm putting on them. And I don't know what it was in me, but I looked at my wife, and I just very vulnerably, with like tears in my eyes, I said, she was getting ready to leave to go. And I go, please don't go. And she's like, why? And I was like, I don't know how to tell you this. If you leave, I'm not going to be here when you get back. Wow. And at that point in time, she knew like it was bad. And I think she knew how bad it was, but I don't think it really hit her, because at the time she was trying so hard to just keep up with 4 boys in the house and everything going on and just pick up the slack. And then when she saw that, she was like, oh my God, this is bad. Yeah. So we went to the emergency room, and I admitted myself in the hospital. And that was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it saved my life. And what I can tell you is that a lot of men get to that point, whether it's, sleep deprivation or stress or overwhelm. It doesn't matter. It's something, right? But here's what I'll tell you. I got on a Zoom call with that man's wife after he took his life. His daughter was there as well. She's 17. He had a son who was 15. And the 3 of them were on a Zoom call with me and 2 other men from the Alliance. Uncle Joe was one of them. I know, Tony, you know who Uncle Joe is. He does the Q&As with me on the podcast. Because I told Uncle Joe, I was like, I got to get on this Zoom call with this family, and I can't do it by myself. And when these 3 people, the wife and the son and the daughter, 15, 17, and the wife, it didn't even take 2 seconds of seeing them on the Zoom call, and their faces, there was no life in their face. Like, there was nothing there. I've never seen 3 human beings more emotionally devastated, and the physical toll that even took on them. It was like seeing something I'd never seen. And we spent about 45 minutes on that Zoom call with the 3 of them. And luckily, like Dad Edge Alliance, we have amazing men. We raised 10 grand as a community in a GoFundMe account. And that's one of the reasons we got on the Zoom call with her, was because we wanted to tell her, like, hey, we raised $10,000 for you and your family. We just need to know where to send this.
That's amazing.
And seeing their feedback and hearing the story of their dad and their husband, I was like, oh my God, like if every man who's considering this could see this right now, they would make a different choice. And I guess the reason I'm getting emotional about it is because that could have been somebody talking to Jessica and my 4 boys. And I just want all men to know your life is worth it. Even if you're in that season where you don't think it is, people love you. People depend on you. You're not nearly the burden that you think that you're telling yourself that you are. You're bigger and better than that. And if you're going through something like that, I will tell you point blank, saying, I need help and I can't do this alone is the hardest thing you're ever going to say when you're in that situation. But it's also the moment that the pressure release gets lifted and you're like, I'm just going to let somebody else take the wheel and take care of me for a minute. And that was a humbling moment, but a great moment at the same time, because I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys had I not made that decision myself. So I get it, man. I really get it.
Thank you so much for sharing. Obviously our hearts go out to that family too. And I think you're highlighting something really important, which is, this is serious stuff too. It's incredibly serious, and it can have such an effect on not just yourself, but your family as well. And I know you're speaking from the experience as a man, and for women as well. One of the groups of people that we often coach are women who struggle with postpartum depression. And the same thing can happen for women as well, where unfortunately, which I've struggled with twice, postpartum depression, those negative thoughts can enter the mind. And I just want to applaud you for creating a space where men specifically can come to be vulnerable and to have a place where they feel like they have support. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing your story, because it's incredibly serious, and we can talk about all of these empowering and uplifting things. And yeah, at the same time, it can be incredibly serious too.
Yeah. And I think we've hinted at what the Dad Edge does to offer tools, support, and community for men. But can you talk about the different levels of the Dad Edge, and if somebody is listening and wants to join the Dad Edge, how they can get in contact and how they can get that valuable support if they need it?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple different things that we have, and I'll kind of go through them each briefly. If you're a podcast listener, we've got a couple free resources. Number one is the podcast. If you're looking to up-level your connection with your wife, I've got a couple of resources. One is called 21 Days to an Extraordinary Marriage. It's an email series that teaches you just a couple skills over email on how to connect and communicate with your wife better. And then there's another free resource called 25 Intimate Conversation Starters. You can find those in the resources tab of our website at thedadedge.com. It's just totally free. You can dive into it if you want. Dad Edge Alliance, that is our program that we've had now since 2016. And we have nearly 800 men that do life with us on the daily. We have almost 50 Zoom sessions per week, 7 days a week, on different topics that we help men, and we teach men skills and that kind of thing. And we do it in a community group level, in a group coaching environment. The second thing we have is called Dad Edge Accelerator. That's for dads who are business owners. So if you're a dad business owner, the reason we have a separate program for that is because if you're a business owner, your mind is wired just a bit differently, and you operate just a little bit differently. Not better or worse, but usually that's a lot to say that if you're a business owner, your mental and emotional and even physical bandwidth is usually, there's a lot more heaviness on that than someone who can who just drives for they drive for FedEx or something like that, which is still a great job. Not downing that, but like having a job like that, you can punch the time card, come home, and that's it. If you're a business owner, it's a bit different. And then the third one is I do some one-on-one coaching. I only take on 4 clients at a time, but I have one-on-one. Right now, I don't have any room in my calendar for that, but I do one-on-one coaching for men, and specifically in marriage with connection, communication, intimacy.
Amazing. And I guess the final question is, if you're able to speak about it, you have one adult book called The Dad Edge. You have a couple kids books, but I hear you have a new book that's coming out. I don't know what you're able to share about on that, but if people can want to look into that, or if maybe they don't have time, or the story they tell themselves is they don't have time for The Dad Edge, but they want to read about what you're all about, where could they find that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I have a couple kids books, like Daddy Will Always Love You and Protect You. It's a great book to read to your kids. Screen Time, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's a kid's book, but it's great for parents to read to their kids. It basically talks about the good things, the not so great things about screen times, and just boundaries around that. The book, The Dad Edge, I launched that back in 2015. That's about your most basic book as it relates to any type of thing with marriage or communication or patience. It's really, really basic, though. The book that you're talking about was supposed to release back in September. It's called The Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood. That's the big one. 285 pages, 85,000 words. It was supposed to be launched, but my publisher went bankrupt. But the good news about that is we are now engaging in what we call the big 5 publishing houses. So I have an agent who's now working for me, which is great. And she's trying to land us a book deal. So the book's totally done. Cover, everything's done, edited, designed, everything. We're just waiting for an offer at this point, but hopefully it'll be out in sometime within spring of 2023. I would say that's the long one. Hopefully it's the beginning, but I don't know. I'm not sure when we're going to get our deal.
It's amazing. Well, I know we'll certainly be purchasing a copy. It's been a wonderful privilege to get to talk to you, and thank you so much for your time and sharing with us. And I hope for our listeners, you will go and check out these amazing resources. I think it's great that you have things offered at different levels, depending on, maybe what people's time permit or their financial accessibility to different things. So thank you for that as well.
And Larry, you're a hero to me, to my family. I cannot understate the extent to which your struggle turning into a strength, turning into a community that supports one another has impacted my marriage, my family, and my coaching practice. So I just want to say personally, thank you so much, not only for sharing the conversation, but for sharing your story with the world.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate you as well. It's good. So good meeting you.
Yes, you as well.
Wow, what an episode. Thank you for listening. We hope you took some meaningful tools and skills that empower you to become your highest self in every way.
We also hope you'll help us spread our messages of solidarity, social support, and consciousness raising by subscribing to our YouTube channel @Mindful&Fit and offering us an honest 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts.
Doing so helps more people hear these important messages of love, healing, and becoming.
And as always, much love from the Johnson family. We hope you make today amazing,
just like you.